I'd like to say that, when Sam and I started to do this podcast, I had some males in my life. One of them in particular that said, "Don't take it too far." So what's too far? What's too far? I have a voice. I'm speaking up against something that isn't okay. So what's too far? That we get to suffer in silence, that we get to just act like nothing's going on, that we don't get to have a voice because we might take it just a little too far. But when you look at the story of Judy, she took it and she kept on speaking. And her voice has to be heard. And when, I've told people on my page, and Judy's voice is still speaking. I still hear her. She's still here working. And she will continue to work. Her voice will not go away. She is with us. I can't get her out of my soul. She's there. I saw her story. Her story was integrated like with mine in that I knew how she felt. I knew that she was frustrated and she couldn't get people to hear her. And then when she has to freaking go through what she did, and she still came through and said, "This is not right. This is not okay."
She testified to her own homicide. She said, "I wanted somebody to finally listen to me," in her testimony. When you call the police 911 31 times and they think, "Oh, she's the addict. He has sobriety. He must be the sane one. He must be the one that is okay. He must not be doing this." And they walk away that many times. And then she told the detective he was going to kill her. He had locked her in hotels and reported her missing, and nobody got it. And she kept trying to get someone to listen to her. And, you'll see some messages where she messages me and says, "Please get Mike out of my home." And I said, "Why?" The police wouldn't make him leave her home.
Well, I think sorry, Patricia, sorry.
I was just going to say also there's like this element of this that is work the system needs to do, right? Those police are going to those phone calls and they don't have any documentation on the way to that house about her record. They don't have documentation about prior calls. They don't have documentation about other women that Michael's abused, or when Judy was living in another county or at another address, or calls that came from another address. They don't have any of that. And that's not the individual police officer responding to the call's fault, but that is definitely our fault as a society. Like, you should be at the very least playing with a full deck. There should be specific training about how to approach a domestic violence call and how to see past when the person who is calling because they feel they are a victim of domestic violence is intoxicated. That is going to happen. Just because you are intoxicated does not mean somebody is not beating you. And there is just sort of this de facto, I mean, it's not a policy, but it's an unwritten policy where you just sort of show up, read the room, and if someone looks guilty or looks, like they cried wolf, then that's all that gets done. And there are ways to fix that,
And that's interesting.
There are, and the juggernaut is definitely moving. I mean, I don't know how you feel, like your experience from 5 years ago to now, and certainly myself as a filmmaker and as a survivor myself, and the difference that there is, that it's so systemic, it's institutionalized, that if we are all sat here understanding it and we know what needs to be done, then how come the leaders who are able to stop this from happening, why aren't they doing what needs to be done? And I think it's getting to the point where it's almost becoming like well, this is by design unless you actually do something now, and things actually have to happen. We've just had it with the Met. I mean, we've got the laws, but rape is decriminalised in this country. Domestic abuse is the police core business in this country. It costs us £74 billion a year. I don't know how many trillions it is in the US. So you're absolutely right, Patricia, that this film should feed into not just the laws, but actually the system and the society, us as a society, of how do we want this to actually carry on for generation after generation after generation. And it is time to say no.
Yeah, for sure. After we went through the court process and Michael was sentenced and they unsealed Judy's testimony, because I did not see Judy's testimony. I did not discuss it with her. I wish I could have, but she was under a court order not to discuss it. So when they sealed it, they sealed it. With that said, I started Judy's Foundation in her honor and in her legacy so that her voice would be heard. And one of the quick hits that I see, especially from first responders in Judy's case, I ask, well, why didn't anybody do anything after 31 calls? Why didn't they even stop and talk to him, as I said in the film? And what we hear is, or what we know now, is that the first responders, as Trish was just talking to, they don't have any information in front of them. So they get a call, they show up blindly. They don't know that their colleagues have been there 10 times, 20 times, because there's no technology, if you will. They have, which was baffling to me, because they have laptops. They have all kinds of technology in that cruiser, but not to pull up, say, Michael's history. They could only see Judy there using drugs that he had brought to her, but they didn't see his history. So I think that when I started the foundation, one of our quick hits has been to ensure that we roll out the technology in every single state and your local agencies, where they can see if they get a call to your house, they can do a check. If Mrs. Smith says he's beating her, then they should be able to look at, well, what kind of guy is Mr. Smith, right? We've been there 25 times. Maybe we should just take him to jail since we've been there 25 times. But they don't have that.
Well, and what they do have the power to look it up retroactively.
Right.
Like, you can go and look at anyone's record, but you really need that on the way there. And I think it would also be helpful, in speaking to, I was helping with a little bit of research on this. I spoke to different police departments, and, it would be helpful to these people genuinely to understand this guy is potentially one of the most dangerous calls you can go to is a domestic violence call, because you can show up and there can be a guy with a gun and he can absolutely smoke you and himself and the wife and everybody. I mean, it happens in this country. And so, they should be going into these calls with information about whether there are prior weapons charges, whether there are prior domestic calls between the couple, prior domestic calls on the potential perpetrator. And that should be summarized in a tiny little bar at the top of the dispatch screen. You're not asking this guy to read 800 pages of reports. It's a piece of information for him to use and go in and assess the situation. That's a simple piece of technology to build. I've also been speaking with some app developers. This is a program that could potentially, if the dispatch software partnered, cost under $100,000 to make. How many millions of dollars will you save in cases gone wrong, in women who are, or men who are killed by their intimate partners, their children going into the system, the brain drain on the country of these women who are stuck at home, whose lives are ruined. I mean, and it's a very solvable problem.
Absolutely. And it fits.
I got a question. Sam,
sorry.
I'm going to interrupt you. I have a question because I don't want to forget this. What is the reason? How come they knew about her drug history and they didn't know about his stuff?
Well, there's twofold. Michael brought her drugs, so when he would call the police, he would say, she's high. I didn't touch her. I didn't lock her in the closet. She's high. Don't listen to her, And he did not do drugs. So he preyed on women who were very weak. When you look at his rap sheet, they were all of women that were weak, and then he knew what to do for their weakness. So then that shamed Judy, if you will, because she was using drugs. He was bringing her drugs after she had gotten sober, right? So they knew about that drug use, number one, for that reason. And then the two facet of they knew about her drug use is that the accuser, if you will,
That's not the police.
I guess the reason I'm saying that though is because it they didn't even check. I mean, they didn't check. I mean, they just went by what he said. So he gets to say, and then, oh, okay, well, that's got to be it. I mean, seriously, I understand why you're irritated. I'm sorry, I'm kind of like wound up a little bit right now.
But there's also the issue of the crime, right? So if you are a drug user, you're going to stay in, and you have a home, you're going to stay probably around your home in your county using. You're probably not super mobile. If you're a habitual abuser, you're abusing women in all these different counties, right? And the police departments don't aggregate that information. There is no tool.
I understand that. I guess what I'm trying to drive is not letting them off the hook so easily, because it's like, if you're getting a call in that county by her 31 times, and you're not even willing to look at the other party that's calling, that's aggravating. It's like,
to me, there's no excuse for it.
Exactly.
There's nothing that they can say. I know we don't have the technology as Tricia is talking about, and I understand that, but when they have that many calls to her home and they didn't even turn it over to a detective to investigate what's going on or to stop and talk to him, as I said in the movie, they just assumed, I think she's an addict, they're fighting, and they just sloughed it off. Nobody stopped to even investigate it or turn it over, which they could have very well turned it over to a detective for it to be investigated.
Well, what's terrifying is legislatively in Ohio and in most states in the U.S., punching your wife or your girlfriend in the face is a misdemeanor. So you're about as likely to turn that over to a detective as you are somebody stealing apples from a grocery store, which is also a misdemeanor. That shouldn't be a misdemeanor, right? That should be prosecuted with the same fury you would a felony. And the other issue is this, this sort of loophole of, well, it hasn't happened yet, or if we haven't seen it, it's not happening, right? We have to be there when at the moment of impact, we have to see the bruise, we have to have documented evidence. And historically, this is not working. This is not a good way to handle this issue. And we don't have a backup plan in the US that's in any meaningful way.
Well, I have to say, it's exactly the same in the UK. Everything that you have stated is exactly the same. What happens here is we've got, we've actually got a thing where victims can ring up to check a partner's history, say a new partner's history. But he could perpetrate in one county and not have a record in another, and the police don't speak to each other. It's that same thing. There is not that information. There's not that connectivity. There isn't that consistency. And when it comes to every single thing that you said about the punch, it hasn't happened yet. We had one where a child had told their school that their father had a gun and that he was coming to school, and the mother was there, and he was the abuser. She had a non-molestation order and everything, and the police said he hasn't shot her yet, so we can't be there to prevent it. It's happening everywhere, and you're absolutely right in that it's systemic and it's institutionalized, and like the idea that you have could revolutionize both frontline officers' work and keeping people alive.
I think it has to be done. It just that that technology through her foundation just absolutely has to be done, and it's got to be, across the U.S. because I think, to your point, it will keep people alive. There's so many other people that their life was cut short and taken because of these situations where they come in with a preconceived notion that if the woman is not spotless, if you will, when the police's
even when
perception.
they are even when they are the same, it's the same thing. Even if the woman is sober, it is exactly the same thing. And Kat is right and Patricia's right in that, there has to be accountability for police and the courts and everybody else, because if you can come up with these ideas, we can come up with these ideas, and we can see where the holes are and how to fix them really cheaply, then there is a massive problem. And the question we have to ask is, why hasn't this been done already?
Well, look, Sam sent me a book. The book is called Control. It's by Jane.
Monkton Smith. Professor
Yes.
Jane Monkton Smith and Warwick University. I was thinking the same thing, Kat. And what you were saying, Patricia, about a really small box. So she has got it's university research. She's a criminologist and she's ex-forces, but they've done the research, and they have two: timeline to homicide and timeline to suicide, because they're starting to look at the induced suicides now, or the murder by suicide as we're calling it. And the way she's done it is you're able to say he's a stage 1, he's a stage 6, he's a stage 9, or stage 8. Stage 8 is when they kill you. So using that system, that's literally all they'd have to say to each other is, we're going to a domestic, there's a male and he's a stage 7. And they would know exactly what that meant, Kat, wouldn't they?
Yeah, because in those stages, they've gone through and done, okay, we're in stage 1, this, we're in stage 2, this, we're in stage 3, this, all the way up to stage 7. It starts that planning stuff. And a lot of these people hang out in like 3 to 6 or 4 to 6 or somewhere in there. They bounce around in there in keeping the victim tied in. It's when they start to plan. And, right now we have, and so does the UK, where you can get a temporary restraining order to prevent somebody with a piece of paper from coming back into your life. Not going to happen, but we have it. And our question is, why do we have to start at 7 before somebody starts to pay attention, and possibly 8? Why can't they start at 8 and bounce these guys, and not just guys, but gals, back down and see where they actually are, and then apply the law appropriately to those people? If somebody's going to go out and say, I'm going to take that person out, in a threat, in a text, and the victim is too scared to come forward to say that has happened, but you have a text with it, you can look at that. Okay, what's the reason you're putting that in a text? It just drives me nuts.
Well, like Jane Monkton Smith says, you don't get to stage. The only way they don't get to stage 8 is if they never get to stage 1 in the first place. So every stage 1 absolutely has the potential to do stage 8 always, and the threshold needs to come, like Kat was saying, needs to come right down. At the moment, the threshold is stage 8, and it's too late, and then there's apologies. Oh, we should have done this, we should have done that, and it's another dead body. It needs to come down to stage 1, so that and this is why she did it, so that the right interventions can come in at the right stage. And I think it's a game-changing tool, and it might be something that you might be interested in, Judy. We can share stuff with you.